Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KMED this weekend. Pete Belcaster and Joe Brett, the Real Estate Guys, with you. We're both real estate brokers with John L. Scott in Southern Oregon, and we get together with you once a week here on KMED to talk about all sorts of real estate-related issues and topics. Now, 7 years worth, and, well, Joe, still going strong, right? We're still here.
And our great guests keep coming back. That's always a good sign as well.
And remember, some of the past shows have really been topical. We've had more comments and emails to me anyway from listeners regarding the estate sales, that big show that we did. And in fact, Lance is. He's doing another one for me. Seriously,
exactly,
another estate sale, and the way you do that. And also about the pre-home inspections. That seems to be a big thing because many people, Joe, are in the same boat as me. I found out that getting that pre-home inspection, even other realtors have commented on that, yes, that does make sense to have it because I control my price better by having that information before the buyer then the buyer controls it, and I've got some leverage there. So those are some past shows, and please go back because there's some, again, great guests. And today, Kelly Madding has been with us many years. Once a year, we invite her to come down from the courthouse to join us. She's Jackson County's Development Services Director, and, it's always great to see you. I can't believe how many times this last year I read your name in the news and in the paper and saw you. So you survived, I guess, but you're still smiling. So that's good, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
A great real estate show story that Kelly told me. Mm-hmm. She was on a show last year or the year before, I believe, and she was out on Saturday and able to tune in. And all of a sudden, she heard your voice come across the way from her neighbor's pasture over there. So
listening,
I had a listener out there
That's right
across the road from her. And she was, well, gosh, I think that's why she comes back now. She knows that people actually are hearing all this great information.
Well, it is good. Well, tell me, I mean, you really had quite a year. The planning department in Jackson County, and it's centered on I know a number of things, and we'll get into some of those today. But start us off with just kind of an update on the building that's going on, the kinds of things that generate jobs that create that has helped this economy and help the real estate market to be right now going the way it is.
Certainly. So we are seeing a definite uptick in single-family homes being built and commercial development. For example, in the last 4 years, we're looking at about a 31% increase in single-family residential stick-built homes being permitted. We're also, this past year, the 15-16 fiscal year for us, we had 49 commercial permits that were issued.
49?
Yeah, and we typically are around the 20 to 25 commercial permits issued.
Now, when you say commercial permit, what does that mean?
It means a commercial, it could be industrial or commercial. It's not residential. Let me put it that way.
It's just not residential.
Not residential.
What would you attribute that to? What are they looking, or what are they seeking, or what are they going to build, or what are they going to do?
I think it's a variety of commercial endeavors. It could be fast food because White City is unincorporated, so there's a large commercial area and industrial area in White City, or the commercial areas in between Medford and Phoenix and Talent, and So I think we're seeing more of that and more residential development, which is a really good thing because what happened was, in the boom, we were issuing about 500 to 600 residential permits. And then in the bust, we were issuing about 200. Okay. Now we're up to about 300, and this last year, 367. So that 350 to 400 residential permits is about kind of where we have been on average.
Okay.
And so I think I remember coming to you and saying, how many years? I can't wait to see where the bottom is because we're just moving toward the bottom in the Great Recession. And I just wish we would hit the bottom. So at least we knew where that was. And then ideally we would start coming out of it. And it's really clear that we've started coming out of it.
Yeah, well, your information is exactly right because in the MLS stats, which showed 85 new homes during that last 3 month period, that equates to about 360 over time there. So 500 to 600 was the height. We dropped to 200, and we're slow. We still have not reached that that's probably why our inventory
Yeah,
is the way it is.
Probably
A lot
okay
of
that we don't get all the way back.
Well, no, I understand that, but that's probably part of the reason
Right.
that the inventory today is maybe as low as it is, because you drop 400 year after year there. That has an effect cumulatively. Anyway, okay.
Absolutely.
And do you see more in the, and I know you deal with the county mostly here, but do you see more or any developments coming up, housing projects? Where's it coming?
Where are
What's
those
happening?
county houses? I would imagine a bunch of them in White City because they've had a nice little building boom out there, and there's still some buildable land available out there.
Absolutely. So what we're seeing in White City is subdivisions that have kind of were left not developed during the recession. And often it's a new owner. The owner has lost the
these old ones
property
went
or
bankrupt?
yes,
Yep, okay.
and they're gone, and we have a new owner coming in. And they may want to tweak some things, but they want to move forward with that development. And that's where the bulk of it's White City, while it's unincorporated, functions much like a city in terms of its density and those kinds of things. So you have small areas with lots of homes. And we're seeing development out in the county, just generally in the unincorporated areas, kind of scattered around.
In rural, what's happening in the rural? I mean, we'll talk about rural properties here in a minute, but I see that. But the thing is, they've also dropped. Did you know that?
Yeah.
I mean, a year ago, we were talking about like the land rush was on, Kelly. There was people were buying up properties unseen. If they only had this, they have EFU and they had water,
Right.
they were sold, you know,
Right.
kind of thing. And to show you how far that's come, a year ago, again, there was over 200 of those properties sold in the county. In this last 3-month period, there was only 140. So that's a pretty significant drop. It's more like normal kind of things again. So, yeah, well, we're seeing that. Well, that's good to hear. Do you think there's enough land out there? Is there enough interest to continue this, do you think, in new construction in the county areas?
I think so. And I think what's going to aid that is some cities doing some urban growth boundary expansions,
Okay.
taking in some county land that had been designated as urban reserve or, next areas to grow into. The city of Medford is looking at doing an urban growth boundary expansion that's fairly large.
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
The city of Central Point has already done 2, and that was for some commercial or industrial properties. But they're also looking. Talent is looking. Phoenix is looking. So everyone is looking because of the issue that you just talked about. Nationwide, we've just had some of the lowest years of housing being built, and this housing shortage that needs to be satisfied. And so I think the cities are poised to kind of capitalize on that, or at least address that by these urban growth boundary expansions, because the county really isn't set up. The statewide land use program isn't really set up to allow dense development in the county, though that dense development is supposed to take place in cities.
In the cities, okay.
Right.
And that's yeah. Well, you go to those hearings. What do you tell me? What you think of those? What are you hearing? What do you see?
I know that Medford has a painstaking process in finalizing their UGB expansion, and they're really working hard. And there's a lot of pressures and a lot of demands of developers that want to get in the game, and they bring some great things to the table. They're bringing school acreage, they're bringing parks and trails acreage to the table to try to kind of sweeten the deal and tie it into the surrounding neighborhoods. And I'm going to politicize a little bit here. This is opinion only of this host, but everything you have to do, the 1,000 Friends of Oregon sit in the audience have to check off on all those little things. And if they say they don't like something, then people tremble.
Everybody stops to start over.
And you can't do that. And they so by our land use laws and by the process, it makes it more difficult or at least more challenging in some respects. But there's such a need for that land. The buildable land that Brad Bennington told us for years that was foreclosed on, was cheap, is gone. The 10,000 new homes are up and back, that land that's platted and ready to grow in southwest Medford,
East Medford. Okay.
They're building there again, but there's still a long way to go. But that's still not going to come close to meeting the demand.
Okay. How many of the 10,000 have been built in the Southeast plan? Do you know?
I'll bet you it's
half?
close to 3,000-4,000. I think we stalled.
Okay,
and it's just rough numbers off the top of my head. But
all right,
I think we got about a quarter of the way into that before the recession.
Yeah. No, I've always heard that Central Point. Now, Kelly, make this one straight. That Central Point has extended their boundary by some special line goes the railroad tracks down so they can connect across the freeway down by Blackwell Hill. Is that true?
That is true. So they're able to take in that kind of Tolo exit, because that area was looked at very specially in the regional problem solving process. And the whole region looked at that area and said, look, we have rail, we have trucks, we have a freeway on and off ramp. And so we want to create this environment that is for freight and trucking.
Okay.
And so I think that's what you're going to see there. It was not really
not
ever
necessarily
designated
residential.
not residential and not like big box commercial either.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And so it was
All
a
right.
unique area that Central Point wanted to take in, and I think to add to their industrial inventory, which I think was smart, and we'll be able to serve that area with water and sewer at
Okay.
some point,
All right.
and use that area for that freight and
Okay.
trucking. So maybe some
Yeah.
trucking and freight kind of move out
Sure.
to that area
Right,
and free
right.
up some of the sort of more commercial-like areas in some cities.
Well, I like
Yeah,
that makes sense.
sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
And
If
the
you-
other
oh,
challenge too of these cities growing, Pete, and identifying these areas is we're on the valley floor and we're surrounded by incredibly valuable
farmland.
agricultural
I know.
land.
Oh yeah.
So
I know.
that also makes it a little
Yeah.
bit hard to find those places and get them through the process.
Let me ask you this, Kelly Maddie. If you're a betting person, is Costco going to get to move in Central Point?
Ooh.
Is that going to happen? What are you if you were gauging that
I would say I would take that bet.
that they will?
Yes.
At some point, I would say at some point
Yes.
they're probably going to prevail, aren't they? I mean, at some point.
Changing characteristic for that area then.
Definitely.
Huge,
Yeah.
huge. Well, and I was going to say to both of you, you guys were talking about the process that you've gone through and the 1,000 Friends of Oregon and all that kinds of things. A lot of people will argue that that's probably been good for Oregon to have that kind of conflict in there because it has made our state not go crazy, with one way or the other too far, that you kind of balance somewhere in there, and we still have this beautiful place that has become such demand that people want to come here. So maybe that is kind of, I know it's frustrating for anybody working in it.
I like
but in
silver
some
linings.
ways,
I'll see
yeah,
that.
but in some ways that may have helped. Who knows there? Anything. So in the air, what else within that area of construction? Anything else you want to share with us, Kelly, before we change topics here? Because I remember when you first came on, there was nobody working in her office. I mean, you were like the only person in there, right? Right? Isn't that true?
Well, we had some people, but not very many, because when I first started, it was like about the time the recession was starting, and our department, I laid off probably half of my department
Right.
during that time. And now what's been really interesting is we've just been adding staff. Everyone has been adding staff.
Sure.
The planners are at a premium right now, building people, building inspectors, building techs. And so we're competing for good people, and I've actually found we've been very lucky, found some really great people to come work for us. And we're expanding to help meet the needs of this expanding market. And then we have sort of this other piece that I think we're going to talk about that is kind of been a tsunami in terms of work for us in the last year and a half.
Okay, before we go there, Brad Bennington says when he was in here that he brings a statistic in from the National Home Builders of the thousands of dollars in costs. Remember that that government adds to home building. What was it? Something
government
like
regulations.
government regulation
$84,000
on an average home.
$350,000 home.
Does that sound weird to you? I mean, I can't know how to argue with that or say what it is, but
Is he talking nationwide?
Yeah.
nationwide
Yeah.
statistics.
Yes.
And I don't. Is
So-
it that high here? I mean, do we
No.
do that much?
No. I mean, for Jackson County, we have building fees for inspections and paying for those inspections and administering the statewide building code. We also have a transportation systems development charge and a park systems development charge, which is fairly nominal. And so that $84,000, I think that's very high.
It would be systems development charges, I suppose you
That
add
would
in
include
there.
all the big metropolitan areas in the United
Right.
States.
Yeah.
So if you had to put in a
it
traffic
doesn't-
light, or you
Right.
had to, you were building a hospital and you were, you had to put in a traffic light. Well, I'm certain that would be in that statistic. Most of what goes on in Jackson County and the unincorporated areas is single-family dwellings. There are some commercial industrial buildings that are out in White City, but predominantly it's single-family homes and remodels for us.
All right, well, that's good to know. We got a break coming up here in a couple of minutes, but I want to get the rest of our time talking about how recreational marijuana has affecting real estate and certainly what you do, because you're like in the middle of all of this, aren't you? I mean, aren't you like, you're the point person in the county here for this, the new rules or regulations or whatever, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I have that auspicious.
A year ago when
duty.
you were here, I remember we said, let's wait and see a year later what happens before everybody goes crazy. Hadn't been taken effect yet, right? A year ago.
Right.
All right. Well, we're a year later. I mean, I don't know even where to start. We'll let you go. You got a break coming up here, but has it been as crazy as it seems? Like what I read and that kind of thing?
It has been a little crazy. It's new. Everyone is kind of getting used to it. The laws continue to change. And I think it has dramatically affected real estate and property in Jackson County.
It certainly has. And we talk about it with clients and people come here, they talk about it. And
voters are going to be making decisions on these issues in the county and the cities coming up in November.
Well, we're going to take Kelly's take on it when we come back after this break here on The Real Estate Show. Don't forget, you can check all of our past shows at realestateshoworegon.com or also on YouTube. Of course, we'd love to hear from you as well. You can email Joe or I anytime at realestateshoworegon.com. We're coming right back with Kelly Madding right after this. The Real Estate Show rolls on KMED. August the 13th is our date. Pete Belcaster and Joe Brett, the real estate guys, with you. Next week, landscaping. You're here in the middle of August, getting ready for making your home pretty to sell, because landscaping, what are those things? It's location, price, and condition, and
Curb appeal.
Curb appeal is the other one in there. If you don't have it, it's bad, right? The price, you see the dollar sign just go down, It doesn't look good.
We just had a little visit at our new listing on 4th Street in Medford to do just that. And the yard looks all cleaned up and pretty now.
Well, you got to get the yard clean. You paint it. You want
tenants
someone to buy it.
Tenants don't always leave the yard looking great for you on their way out. We've come to learn that along the way.
Well, today here on The Real Estate Show, Kelly Madding, who's Jackson County's Community Development Director, is with us today. And Kelly is in the center. We've talked so far in the show about building and what's going on in development in the county. And the rest of our show, we're going to kind of devote to recreational marijuana issues, because that seems to be a real topic. I can't think of, Joe, okay, in the 9 years that we've been brokers, recreational marijuana has been the biggest, to me anyway, has been the biggest real estate issue that we've seen, isn't it? Would you say?
I'd have to say the recession and the near collapse of the American economy.
Well, that's
might
before
trump
that.
it just a little bit.
No.
But it's a close second.
Since before that, it was already done.
That's just perspective I was lending there.
Anyway, but Kelly has been in the middle of it. I think it's affecting real estate a huge manner.
It has.
Anybody who's moving here talks about it. The sheriff last year had somebody in his office right before he came down who moved here from Illinois just to be able to grow four marijuana plants. Look at the people in warehouses trying to get warehouse plants. Look at the water. You can't haul water right now across Jackson County because the water guys are hauling water to marijuana grows. And their wells are all dry around these places. The tree guy, you couldn't even get a tree guy there because he's cutting down trees to make sunlight for marijuana grows around the valley. It's stories like that continue to mount. And Kelly, you're right in the middle of this whole topic, and I have no idea how you solve it. What do you do with it? Where do we stand a year after this has gone into effect? What do you think?
Well, Jackson County's ordinance has come into effect. So not only did, recreational marijuana become lawful, and then the rules around that kind of took place, and there was a lot of legislation to kind of clean up, or not clean up, but change Measure 91. And now Jackson County has adopted its ordinance, and that ordinance has actually been appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Hopefully we'll be getting a verdict on that by August 22nd. But there have been a lot of changes and some finality in terms of where people can grow, where people kind of can't grow, the number of plants, the acreage, those kinds of things. That has kind of, and now that may change, but at least I think Jackson County's ordinance, being adopted has provided some more certainty to people, both in the industry and people who aren't in the industry.
I think that's good. I think that's fair. And the way to describe that.
And in vetting the process, really both sides and all sides of the issue have come forward, have been really well represented, and there are concerns about the impact, and there are concerns about the medical industry, and it was a really compelling discussion all the way through. It really was.
You sat through those with me.
Had some up close and personal experience with those.
And you had a lot of hearings, and a lot of people came out for them,
Right.
too.
Oh, absolutely.
Hundreds.
Probably the most that I've ever seen.
Well,
Yeah.
we were thinking that,
people.
I bet it's the most since the original land use hearings back in the 70s, that so many people came out to the courthouse and even city councils on this particular issue.
And it's a land
What-
use process in the end as it comes
Yeah.
down to these ordinances and applications.
What do you think the biggest problems are or issues that are still out there? I mean, you talked about you can only grow in the county in EFU land. I mean,
And
those
forest
kind,
land.
But
Mhm.
forest land.
But as this
those
has been, as the ordinances come together, there's just been this kind of free-for-all time here where we've gone from into the legalized area. Now for 13 months, it's been legal in Oregon, and I know that's brought some changes to the game.
You know, it has. I think that the county identifying areas that are for growing, and then identifying sort of impacts and how to mitigate those impacts. So, for example, the board was concerned and the planning commission was concerned about light pollution because they had heard complaints and seen pictures of greenhouses that are like, on a hillside lit up
night.
at, 2 o'clock in the morning that looked like a spaceship. We're concerned about that. So they made a rule that, you can't have visible light from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. the next morning to kind of mitigate those issues. Camping in trailers or tents. So no camping in trailers or tents associated with marijuana. And that actually is it's no different than our current code. Our current code really only allows 3 times when you can live in an RV. And one of them is not to protect your agricultural crop.
Okay.
So, those kinds of things that the board had been hearing as complaints from neighbors, they kind of really looked at those to try to mitigate those issues. At the same time, trying to balance the fact that the legislature made recreational marijuana and medical marijuana a farm use. When they give marijuana the designation of a farm use, it does allow and afford those properties it allows special things for them.
Okay.
And special protections. And I say that while saying also that the county was given the ability to provide reasonable regulations around marijuana. That's, time, place, and manner. But the board trying to balance this burgeoning industry that is lawful now with those impacts that industry brings that are different than, honestly different than some other crops. For example, the lighting issue. Well, we never had a problem with lights on in the middle of the night because there wasn't a crop that was worth enough to pay the electric bill to keep lights on in a greenhouse.
The smell issue, is that the next thing that's going to be, I don't want to say fought over? Is that? Because obviously big grows are going to have that, right?
They do. And I think odor is a big issue.
Really? Okay.
Because that's what most people identify immediately. Oh, there's a grow. That and the fences. I would say those two things are the things that identify that marijuana product is being grown there. We haven't heard that many complaints on smell yet, but we will in September and October, of course, as it gets closer to harvest. But we don't have an odor ordinance in Jackson County. And again, because it is a farm use, there are other farm uses that have odors, and we don't regulate those odors of those farm uses. So how the board tried to mitigate some of the odor issues as well was, for example, not allowing recreational marijuana to be grown within 250 feet of a city limit line. So buffering that kind of dense development that would take place in the city and buffering that against marijuana grows. But, there are lots of places. We have small parcels in Jackson County. 20% of our EFU parcels are 5 acres or less. And so when you talk about putting marijuana on those little acreages, it does have an impact sometimes to the neighbor.
Well, how can like Josephine County have 2,100 marijuana grows? What does that mean? Are these big things? Or are they small? Or
They pretty much have been there all this time.
well, Jackson County.
I don't think a lot of those
when you say a marijuana grow, what are you talking about? Is commercial? Is it medical?
Are those registered?
Are they registered? Are they doing it legally? I think that's what most people want to know. But you're right. You drive by a fence. Every fence you see now in Jackson County, you say, I know what that is. That's
Fences and attempts at fences.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, most of the marijuana that's being grown right now, or was grown before this spring, is all medical, because that was all that was lawful until this spring, until licenses were issued by the Oregon Liquor Control Commission to do recreational marijuana growing. In Jackson County, what's interesting is we have about 5% of the total population of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of medical marijuana, we had 13% of the growers, 12% of the patients, and 10% of the grow sites. 5% of the population, but over 10% of those. And if you add Josephine County in, it ups our population percentage to about 9%. And those numbers go to about 20% or a little bit more.
It's about 20%. Okay.
So this is a very prosperous place to grow marijuana.
We have found that out. Hold that thought. Yes, because it certainly is.
The conditions and the climate and the soils are perfect. Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing $1 billion industry growing here, and it's affecting your neighbors, and it's affecting you. And as you say, is it going to affect home prices and land values? Well, to ask you that question when we come back, Kelly, we're with Kelly Manning here on The Real Estate Show. Coming right back. One more segment to go. Real Estate Show rolls on KMED. August the 13th is our date. Glad you joined us here on The Real Estate Show. Don't forget, you can check out any of our shows at realestateshowOregon.com anytime. They're all there, and we invite you to do that. Has some terrific shows for you here this summer. So it's been quite a summer. It's just we've been going now. Think about it. The market. Think about back to spring and how we knew this was going to happen, and it did. And it kind of cooled off a little bit now in summer, a little bit. People are on vacations. But anyway, the biggest story is still that you've got the month supply of inventory remain less than a month's supply, and the price ranges of $150,000 to $250,000 and $250,000 to $350,000 price ranges. Those are still less than 1 month's supply. And so with 33% less inventory from a year ago, you can see why the pressure on prices and everything continues to affect the market, much like recreational marijuana does. And that's why we're Kelly Manning, who's Jackson County's Development Services Director, is joined us here today on The Real Estate Show. I'm fascinated by it. We talk about there's no odor policy in the county. That's true. There isn't one. And it's treated as a agriculture product, much like a cow would be. I mean, they have odor or certain things like that. That's going to be such an interesting topic as you go through this, isn't it? I mean, you've never faced anything like this in your career. I mean, anything remote like this, have you, Kelly?
No, this is a giant policy change for Jackson County and counties like us. I mean, I think we have a very good climate. We are known for growing very good cannabis.
Yeah.
And that's only, I think, fueled this industry, this burgeoning industry where, it's a farming industry.
Yeah. And one of the things we also need to mention is that a lot of people who have moved here and have bought these rural properties that were scooping them up, as they were last year so fast, and that still continues. Many of them are young people who are coming here and they're getting back to the land, whatever they're doing. I think that's an encouraging sign also that younger people are also involved with this. I mean, that's just my thought there. I don't know if that matters anyway, but I've seen a lot of that go on. What do you think if you look ahead, the biggest issues, odor you said you're going to deal with that in the fall, obviously. You're going to hear about that.
We're going to hear about it, but there's not really much we're going to be able to do about it because we don't have an odor ordinance. People can have a chicken farm that has a lot of odor, or other kinds of farming enterprises that have odor. And that kind of farming, that activity is actually protected in Oregon. So we haven't deviated from that. We kind of just tried to put marijuana into our code or into our ordinance, kind of like we would have done any other crop, except we recognize that this crop has a little bit different challenges and a little bit different activities that affect neighboring properties. I think one of the biggest issues right now is that our current code, what happened at the very end before the board adopted this ordinance was the legislature made medical marijuana, which there is a lot of medical marijuana being grown in Jackson County in Southern Oregon. They made it a farm crop. They made it a farm use. And in Jackson County, a farm use is allowed by right on EFU, or exclusive farm use, and forest resource land. It is not allowed on rural residential lands. Rural residential lands are for residential use.
Mm-hmm. Do these grows, Kelly, that they're out there, because EFU land pays very little property tax, are they taxed the same way with having these grows on them, the same as a crop of wheat or something like that?
I believe so. It's a farming activity,
Really?
so it's an exclusive farm use zone.
So they basically pay very, very, very little property tax then.
Well, it's not any different than if you had someone growing wheat or tomatoes or something like that, right?
But they pay very little property tax. So having a tax on marijuana then is not necessarily a bad idea for the county to do, right? To implement then, because they're not paying much in property tax to them.
Well, I think the state has allowed counties and cities to adopt taxes for sales. And so that's where, if there was a tax to be passed,
would go there.
That's where it would go, not on the grow.
Not at the grow site, that kind of thing. So basically, it sounds like then you can pretty much grow without much tax. You're not paying much property tax if you're on EFU. You're paying no transaction taxes as it goes through the system to the end user. Interesting. That's something that I don't know. That just seems a little bit odd there. What do you tell realtors? I know you teach a class with realtors, and what are the big things that you tell them, or what for our listeners? What are the things that kind of stand out to you that we all should know or need to know as we go forward from, say, here in the middle of August?
So a couple of things. One is that the county's regulation really doesn't cover, except in White City, what we call personal grows, which are 4 recreational plants, Measure 91 allowed 4 recreational plants per household, or what would be equivalent to growing for 1 card if you have a medical marijuana card, or 6 mature plants. So out in the county, aside from in the urban residential zones, which are the kind of residential zones in White City primarily, you can just grow that without coming in to get a permit.
Right.
In White City, you can do the same thing, except you have to grow it inside, indoors.
Okay.
But anything other than that requires a land use permit. It requires a land use compatibility statement for the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, and it requires then coming back to us and us saying, okay, here are the regulations that govern marijuana that are unique to marijuana. That is one thing. So if you're growing your 4 plants, that's our regulation doesn't cover that, except it needs to be grown indoors, like in White City, for example. And then the other thing is, like I was saying, right now, marijuana is not allowed to be grown on rural residential lands. So
these are the RR, right?
This is RR.
So your zone. Okay.
Right. So if you were coming in and you had just purchased a piece of rural residential land and you wanted to grow marijuana, according to our ordinance, you couldn't at this point. Now, there may be an option, I don't know, for people that were growing before the ordinance changed, before the state law made medical marijuana a farm use, to become non-conforming, although I don't know if that's going to be available. They'll be able to apply. I'm not sure if people will be approved. So I think that's the other thing. And I think everything is changing so rapidly. If you have questions, please call the planning department or come down to the planning department.
Yeah.
I sit right by the counter, and 50% of our business right now is related to marijuana.
50% of it is related to marijuana. That's why if you have clients, send them down to you, because, if you don't know the rules, and hopefully maybe the rules, I don't know, be printed somewhere we can find them easily or look at them easily for certainly people moving here, for realtors or people wanting that, because they have changed, and I like it. You've come a long way in the year, Kelly, actually, in this, more than I kind of thought. But it's still going to be another fascinating year for you as we continue to refine it better.
Right.
All right. Well, Kelly Madding, she's at the Jackson County Courthouse. She's the Development Services Director. You can always Google her and find her. Thank you for being with us. We got to go. We're out of time.
Thank you so much.
It goes back too fast, Kelly.
It does.
All
every
right.
year.
Well, that'll do it for the Real Estate Show. We'll see you next Saturday here on
You've
KMED.
been listening
Have a great
to the
week.
Real Estate Show on KMED AM and FM radio, presented by John L. Scott Real Estate of Southern Oregon, along with All Cities Property Management, the Home Builders Association of Jackson County, Ditech Mortgage, the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District, and the Rogue Valley Association Association of Realtors. For guest information or to watch a past show, visit us online at realestateshowOregon.com. Join us again next weekend for Southern Oregon's one and only real estate show on KMED.